to you about this. This is the Digitech Digiverb. It's from their X series. It's a nice little reverb pedal. I think new will run you around $120, $130, but you can get them used for probably like $60, which makes them a lot better deal. Solid metal construction, rubber back. Mine's got Velcro on it, but there's a rubber pad there. Rubber grip on the stomp. Now the battery compartment, there's a little button here. You push those in and this will pop up and the battery's there if you want to run it on battery. Mono input, stereo output. Now I should say this isn't true bypass, which is fine. You run into that with a lot of pedals. It's got 4 controls. So you got your level, which is your mix, your EQ to kind of shape the tone a bit, your decay, the amount of decay that your reverb gets, how long it's going on for, and then you can choose the type of reverb. And this pedal comes with 7 types. You know, off here, they're listed underneath here. You'll see in there room, plate, hall, church, gated, reverse, and spring. So yeah, this is there's the 9-volt jack. Not a bad little pedal for, you know, picking it up used. I think it's a good deal, and it's got some really good usable sounds. I would say probably the plate, hall, and the church are my favorite. The room, I mean, you'll get to hear them. You can see what you think. The room, I find it's a little small, like even cranked. I don't know that there's enough, at least for my taste, there's not really enough reverb there that I find the room all that useful. Gated, there might be some applications where you'd want it. I don't really like it the way I play. It just essentially gives you reverb and then to a certain time based on your delay, how much you want, and then it just cuts. So it's just a hard stop of the delay, so it doesn't kind of fade out. It'll go and then just stop, which in some applications maybe you could want. I don't find it that useful. It doesn't sound bad, I just don't like that stop. It doesn't really work for me. The reverse, you can have a listen. I don't use it because it's not what I want in a reverb. And the spring, I will say this, the spring on this I consider to be useless. It's trying to echo a spring too much, and it kind of sounds like you've got an amp with an actual spring reverb in it, and you've shaken it and you hear the springs bouncing around. It's brought that sound into it, I guess, to try and make it realistic, but in my opinion it just kind of makes it useless for using. So out of this, I would say that you have 3 really useful ones: the plate, the hall, and the church. Gated and room are both usable in terms of sound-wise if you like that sound. It's just not my personal taste. But even so, if you can pick one up, $60 used or $40 used or whatever you can find, you can get 3 good reverbs out of it. Nice solid pedal construction, and it also can give you the stereo out if you want to run stereo in your system. So let's plug it in and give it a listen, see what you think. Here's my tone without the pedal on. I'm going to keep the level about here. One thing I'll show you, I got it on 1, which is room here. There is a volume drop, I notice, on this pedal. When you go kind of above the 50% mark, there's a noticeable volume drop. So here. So you can hear that as the more reverb you put in the mix, there is a volume drop. So one thing to keep in mind with this pedal is you probably want to keep it, just a little shy of the 50% mark or around there, and then your volume should be fine. So first, type 1, this is room, and I'll crank the mix all the way up so you can hear just what the room sounds like. Decay all the way up. So now we'll put the mix back so we get the dry signal. So that's on full decay. So here's without the pedal. So I would say I'm not a big fan of this setting on it, just because even with the decay turned up all the way, you really don't get a lot of echo on it. Like there's not a lot of reverb after. It's almost like having the dry signal. Except I will say, hearing it here in the room, like it does fill out the sound a bit as you're strumming. The room doesn't do it. So the room itself doesn't sound bad. I think, you know, it does add a fullness to it, and it could be really good for chords because it's definitely not going to overpower your signal. You know, and that's on full decay. If you turn it back to 50% there. It's good if you just want something to kind of fatten up your sound a bit and don't really want to add a whole lot of reverb on the end of it. But I like to add more reverb, so I don't really use the room setting all that much because of that. So let's change it to plate there. Again, I'll turn the mix all the way up so you can hear what it sounds like. So I think it sounds nice, smooth, and you know, can be fairly subtle. So you definitely get more than the room on full when you're only at 50% on this one. Up. So you hear it does have a fair bit of reverb when you turn the decay up there. Have some kind of higher overtones, but you can EQ that out a bit. Good usable delay. Type 3 is the hall. So turn the mix up all the way and the decay to 50% so you can just kind of hear the reverb. It's a nice, fairly subtle reverb. So I really like the hall. Is probably one of my favorites. I find it very warm sounding, kind of natural, and you can see it's like cranked up all the way. Quite a bit of decay on it if you want to crank it up there, and just kind of fits nice. I may not use it quite cranked up all the way, but it does have that room to get a little bit more airy if you want. So next we'll go to setting 4 is church, and I'll crank the level up so you can just hear the reverb. another warm one similar to the Hall. Now this one is on this pedal that has the most decay on it. So it starts off kind of like the Hall on full decay, but then it just kind of keeps going and fades away. So the church setting up full, like I said, it's the most spacey sound that you'll get on this one. Not great for chord. That'll just kind of get, your chords will get lost in that a bit. So I prefer the Hall setting for doing, you know, kind of chord stuff, and then flip up to the church is better, I find, for, you know, slower single note stuff. Yeah, so another thing is this pedal isn't true bypass, but that means that you get the nice tails on there. Right, so it'll fade out normally even with the pedals not on, which is nice. Because the true bypass, that's the one downside, is you lose those tails. It just chops off. So like I said, so that's the biggest one. I think it's fun for playing around, kind of fills out little single note or small little parts. Number 5 is the gated, and I'll turn it, and like I said before, the gated essentially just gives you a reverb, and then after a certain amount of time just cuts it, full stop. So I'll put the mix up so you get the dry signal. So that was just the reverb, so with the mix. So it's not as bad for chords, you don't notice it as much, the cutoff, but if you're doing little single note things. So you can kind of hear it cutting in and out. So like I said, I don't really have a use for the gated one, not that I think it sounds, the reverb on it sounds bad, but I just don't need a reverb that, you know, has those characteristics where it cuts off like that. Reverse. That's 7. There's reverse. Alright. So this is just the reverb. Let's put it in the mix. So it's not really my thing, and it sounds like it's kind of using a similar algorithm to the gated, where it plays a bit of the reverse and then it cuts off. So I don't know, it could be kind of fun to play with if, you know, you wanted some of those kind of eerie sounds or something, but like I said, it's not really my thing. Now to mode 7, which is the spring, which is the worst setting by far on this pedal, and I find completely useless. I really don't like that kind of tin drum sound that it brings in. That is probably my least favorite thing, is that when if you hard pick single notes, it gives that popping sound that I try to describe as kind of like, a spring being shaken around, but I just really don't like the sound of it. Maybe you do, maybe that's what you wanted, but for me, I never use this setting on the pedal because of that nasty popping sound. For me, the combination of kind of the high, tinny kind of harmonic in the background and the popping, I really don't like that setting. I think this is a good pedal to get if you can pick one up used or get one on a trade. I personally wouldn't spend the money on this one to get it brand new for the cost brand new, because there's just certain things I don't like some of those settings and the volume drop once you're over 50%. But anyway, that's kind of an idea of what the pedal does. You can get more variation too if you play with the EQ a bit and kind of dial in what you want. I tried to keep things fairly consistent across the different types so you kind of hear the difference. So that's the Digitech Digiverb, and I hope you found that useful.